Have you ever seen this lightning bolt of slowness? That sounds so ironic. If you happen to see that icon while you are using the Raspberry Pi, your Pi could be running a lot slower. The lightning bolt is an indicator for undervoltage. The red power LED on the Pi also turns off when undervoltage is detected. Undervoltage means that the voltage reaching your Raspberry Pi is lower than the threshold. Your Raspberry Pi slows down drastically when there is an undervoltage problem. How slow, you ask? Let's run a couple tests. Here I have a custom power supply and I am able to control the output voltage, hence I can simulate both the conditions. First, let's run the benchmark with an undervoltage issue. Okay, it took about 140 seconds to finish. Now let's run the same after increasing the voltage so that we don't have an undervoltage issue. Whoa, look at that. It only took 59 seconds, more than 2 times faster. As we can see, the performance drops drastically when there is an undervoltage problem. Now let's dig a little deeper and find out what's happening. This is the MXL7704 power regulator chip. This chip converts the 5 volts into the voltage required by the processor and other components of the Pi. This is the chip which detects the undervoltage condition. The threshold voltage is around 4.63 volts, and whenever the voltage received by the chip goes below that, it triggers the undervoltage flag, which the operating system can then detect. Let's see a couple of reasons why the voltage goes down. You are probably using one of your phone chargers and you did not buy the official Raspberry Pi power supply. Yes, I totally understand this sentiment. Most of the people have quite a lot of 5-volt chargers laying around from their old phones. I also do not own an official Raspberry Pi power supply. Most of the phone chargers from the last few years are pretty good and are able to perform to their ratings, but all are not built the same. Even though they are all rated at 5 volts, the actual voltage is usually a little higher or a little lower than 5 volts. Look at this one, it is rated at 5 volts 2 amps. Pretty good, right? But when you actually measure the voltage, it is around 4.77 volts, and it increases to 5 volts when I plug in my phone. Here is another one also rated at 5 volts 2 amps. When you measure it, it is around 5.3 volts. But as I mentioned, all are not built the same. You might have one which outputs less than 5 volts. You might be thinking that it's all fine since most of them are above 4.63 volts. But we haven't even talked about the biggest factor yet. The cable. Yes, the USB cable is the biggest culprit. Let's take a look at this. Here I have a Raspberry Pi hooked up with a keyboard and mouse and a display. The voltage at the charger is around 5.3 volts and about 0.4 amps is the load current. But if we check the voltage at the Raspberry Pi power connector, it is hovering around 4.75 to 4.8 volts. That's a reduction of almost 0.5 volts. So there is a voltage loss of 0.5 volts across the cable itself. Let's take a look at what happens when you increase the current draw. I attached an external hard disk to increase the current draw. Now the voltage of the Raspberry Pi is fluctuating around 4.59 to 4.7 at around 0.7 amps. Now the voltage loss across the cable has increased to almost 0.7 volts. Now let me increase the power draw further by running something intensive on the CPU like Sysbench, which is a benchmarking tool, and more voltage loss across the cable. This tells us that as the current draw increases, the voltage loss in the cable also increases. This is not new or surprising. This is just Ohm's law at work. The cable is the bigger culprit, more so than the charger. So how to fix the issue? Firstly, make sure that the phone charger you are using outputs at least 5.2 volts so that the voltage drop across the cable is accounted for, and it can supply at least 2 amps. 3 amps is preferable. Second, minimize the voltage loss across the cable itself. For that, you can get a good quality new shorter USB cable. 1 meter or less should be good. I say new cable because the contact points on older cables would have worn out, or in the worst case rusted to some degree. That causes additional loss of voltage. In my experience, these Amazon Basics 3 feet cables are pretty good. If you're using the Raspberry Pi 4, which uses the Type C port, the OnePlus Dash charger cable is probably the golden standard. It was designed to carry high current. You can definitely use it along with the Dash charger. If you have some experience with electronics, you can also use a good quality buck converter and use a 12 volt adapter and step it down to around 5.3 volts. If you don't want all that hassle, you can just get the official Raspberry Pi power supply. It will fix all your problems, and it's also quite versatile. Anyways, that brings us to the end of this video. If you have made it so far, here's a virtual donut for you. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.